Today we are going to cover bilingualism, right? And student led learning. I thought of having one meeting just for bilingualism and another for student led learning, but then, I ended up noticing that the topics are very tied up together because I think I was a regular English teacher until I started working in bilingual schools and international schools. That was when a new world opened up to me. And then I really understood the difference between teaching English and teaching in English, like being an English teacher versus being a bilingual educator. And then I found that there was this huge distance between the people that were teaching English and the people that were actually like helping people to understand how to communicate in English in bilingual environments. And then, I started studying to start to like unify those worlds because I do believe that like bilingualism is bilingualism. Whether you're teaching English in an English school, like the proposal should be about making a person become bilingual, right? So I thought that's very important to make that difference clear. If I could change the name of our profession, I wouldn't call us English teachers. I would call us maybe bilingual educators. I would call us, like language coaches, maybe. I don't like the word coach too much, but like language coaches, language mentors, and whatnot, because I think that teacher is like so not necessarily what we are supposed to be doing here, because it makes us feel like this is a board, we're going to write shit and then point to it and explain shit, and that's not what we're here to do, right? If we're going to make people speak, because a language isn't about like memorizing grammar or memorizing content. It's about like living the language, being able to express yourself and to be a bilingual person, right? Like, and it was Flora Lewis that said that learning another language is not about just learning new words for different things, or different words for the same things, but learning another way to think about things. And that's the reality, right? When we become truly bilingual, like there's this rush of culture and information that changes who we are fundamentally. And maybe it even transforms who we are in our native language, right? So it's really interesting to see that happening. And like, a lot of the things that maybe students have trouble with are a very natural part of language acquisition that we can track back to normal language acquisition from day one since we're born, right? So I think it's really important to make those comparisons in between like how babies learn how to speak and how we learn to speak, although we have differences when we're already adults, right? And then I always talk about the importance of in classes having real conversations versus putting students into hypothetical situations. You know, that typical role play. Okay, let's pretend we're going to the movies now. You're going to ask me to the movies, and then I'm going to, that, that is kind of like, it's artificial, right? And very rarely that really sinks into what the student needs. I really find it more interesting to have a real conversation about a real experience that student had at the movie theater. And then in a journalistic way, almost like the person is there and I want to know everything about their experience at the movie. So like, do they like to eat popcorn, or do they buy things at Americanas or McDonald's or whatever and take it? What was the last movie they watched? What kind of movie do they like? What is the country that makes the movies they prefer? Like, what is their opinion? What's the best comedy movie? What's the best drama? What's the best that they've ever seen? Because, like, do you really think that a person that has been asked a lot of questions about the movie experience in total will not be able to go to a movie theater and express that vocabulary that they use in our conversation? Like, they absolutely will, because it's about acquiring that vocabulary in a way that is natural, in a way that is real, instead of a situation that really has no meaning to you. Because if we're pretending, we're just pretending. Unless we were actors and we were rehearsing our lines, but then again, we're talking about memorization, not really learning things. And that's not what we're doing, right? These are real people that want to do real things. So I'm not condemning, I'm not really saying that, no, you should, role play is forbidden, but I'm saying that we should shy away from it, that we should like try to avoid it as much as possible. Ask as many questions as possible so that our students are provoked to speak about their experiences versus not real things. Another bilingual thing, that this is something that I found out during my master's studies, that having therapy in L2, in your language 2, finds to be much more efficient because you end up learning how to self-distance from your problems because you're more objective, you're more rational in your second language because you can express your emotions as well in your language too as in language one. Like, puta que pariu, aquele cara, nossa, he wasn't so assim, gente. But in English, maybe you don't have that repertoire, to have all that emotion in your conversation. So when someone asks you about a traumatic event or something that was meaningful that happened to you, your brain is going to work very hard to sum up that whole experience into a phrase that your language capability is able to express, right? And that is a magical ability that bilingual people have. Once we become bilingual, I don't know if you guys notice this, but we tend to become more objective in general. Even in our communication in Portuguese, sometimes we learn how to say things in a way that makes more sense because our brain gets so good at that ability of, like, you know, summing things up and making things into something that makes sense in that L2. So that is another reason to have real conversations in the classroom. Because people after the pandemic are what? Fucked up in the head. They're lonely. They're sad. They're like burning out. They need to be they need to be heard. They need to feel seen. And then my big thing during the pandemic was like, I am going to therapize the fuck out of these people. You know? I'm going to make them feel like they're going to therapy. And that's always the feedback that I get. And if you're getting that feedback from your students, then you are on a fucking right path. You are going in the totally right direction because that's what students should feel. Like, this moment here is a sacred moment that they shouldn't give up on if they're feeling tired. Yesterday, those moms were here and I have a group of English with them too. Some of them are a part of the group. They're after you guys, by the way. And then she said, oh my God, Monday, she's a doctor in psychology. She works at the government and whatnot. And she says, Monday's my most horrible day. I have a meeting at the Secretaria de Cultura and it's so stressful. And sometimes I just want to give up and I don't want to go to English. Then I think about how I feel during English class. And then I'm like, I can't miss that. I really can't miss that because that's my moment to relax. So for a mom, for a working mom, for a person that's busy as hell, to have a moment that she sits down and talks about her life and vents, that is what people want and need. So you're combining the best of both worlds. The person's learning English and the person is feeling like they're therapized. Of course, we are not therapists. We're not licensed therapists. I am an educational psychologist, but I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'm not, a shrink. So I'm going in that direction. I'm thinking of getting a master's in that area, but I'm not a therapist yet. But that doesn't prevent us from interacting with people. And like, interaction with people is a very good therapeutic mediation. Interaction in society, the world is a really good mediator to therapy, right? Because certain things happen to us and they make us learn and grow. So that is important to express. Another thing that is important to say is that there's no such thing as thinking in English in bilingualism, okay? Nobody thinks in English because nobody thinks in Portuguese, because nobody thinks in Spanish, because our brain does not think in languages, right? I think I've said this before maybe, but brains, they are just like computers and they exchange things in electronic circuits like zeros and ones. Let's say it's not zeros and ones because we're not capable of really intercepting what that language is, but we know it's not, grammatical language. It's a concept. We think of something. That's why sometimes we forget the word in all the languages. Don't we have those moments where like, oh my fuck, my brain just melted and I don't have any idea how to say this, but I know what I mean. And that is proof that we don't think in languages. So if you're going to tell your students to think in English, fuck off. Don't. They will not think in English because you will not think in English. So our brain needs to translate those concepts to the language we have most readily available. That needs to be English. And there's no other way to develop that repertoire if it's not via use. Just like you don't give a baby a grammar book, you're not gonna just lay grammar on a person and expect them to become bilingual. So that's just a fact, right? Everything is repertoire. Every fucking thing is repertoire. And then before I ask you guys questions and, I wanted to talk about the phases of bilingualism, right? In bilingualism, the first phase is pre-production. Pre-production is when a student is just able to say little words here and there. I'm not using the CFR because fuck the CFR, right? I'm using like language acquisition milestones here. We're talking about bilingualism. We're talking about, how our brain matures in terms of language. So pre-production is that moment where students are not able yet to have fluid conversation, even if it's not even like A1, A2. Can't even call it A1, A2 if we were to put it in the CFR. That's why I don't like the CFR, because pre-production is that moment where students, they have maybe a lot of vocabulary, but they don't know how to put it together. They have passive knowledge that they don't know how to express. And then we go into early production. Early production is when they're starting those phrases and they're starting to build little phrases with like mistakes, but still they're trying to express what they mean, and we can understand them even though they make a lot of mistakes. Then they evolve to speech emergence, where is when students are able to express themselves more. They're not maybe dominating all the verbal tenses, just like a picture a 6-year-old. Okay, picture like a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old that I'd say a 5-year-old, that is still making mistakes. Maybe they're still saying, you know, things in the past a little wrong because they're applying the rules to other subjects, you know, like eu fazia, okay, like stuff like that. But then with time they end up saying things correctly, and then they end up in intermediate fluency, which is, let's say, a 10-year-old, and then when you're like 14 you are advanced fluency, right? So let's say that a person needs 13, 14 years to have advanced fluency in their native language, right? Because it's very rare that we see a child that is 14 years old and is very eloquent, especially nowadays where people's, you know, language skills are very crippled due to technology and lack of interaction, lack of social connection. Like 13 years, 14 years is what it takes for a person to learn that. Imagine another language, right? It could be either much more if they're doing it very passively. It could be a little bit less because they have the tools to compare L1 and L2, language 1L and language 2. But our goal essentially is to help them feel challenged and get where they need to be, in the sense of, you know, I can understand you. Yes, continue. Let's do it. Express yourself. It will get better, because language, as I said in the end of last meeting, is not about brick by brick in a wall where the student learns one thing at a time. They'll be learning things imperfectly and making them mature. So it's like a garden that you're sowing seeds. I said that, a garden that is sowing seeds, and we're watering it every day. And maybe one flower is already blooming, the other is not quite yet, because they're different species, different things. They're all in the same garden, and they're being fertilized every day through bilingual habits. They're being motivated through, you know, our feedback, through our provocations. And that is essentially our goal, right? So then we end up going into student-led learning without even realizing it, right? Because if we are not being, you know, vertical, if we're bringing horizontality to the class and we're thinking about bilingualism and we're making students' lives the center of our classes, there's no way that we won't be having student-led learning. You know, if the classes are essentially therapy, if everything is about understanding that person's experience, then it will be student-led, right? Even if it's not necessarily a class that is personalized and made the like a different class for every student, right? So I wanted to ask you guys, how do you approach planning classes that give students protagonism? You know, what do you have to say about how you, I don't know, personalize your classes, how you make your classes student led? Also, what are your burning questions? What would you like to know? What do you not understand? What do you feel insecure about? Anything that may pop into your mind now, I would love to hear what you guys are thinking about what I'm saying and provoking you to answer. Anybody? Paula?
Well, I'm still learning how to do it. I need to say it first. But well, I changed a bit how I was teaching the day when I searched for a good idea for a class, a conversation class. And then I wasn't very creative, so I searched on the internet and I found something to talk about the dream house for my students, right? And then I created this class following this website. And then the class brought some types of houses, but I was like, we're not very close. We don't see this kind of houses every day. My students don't have access to this type of houses, so why should I use them as examples? As example in my class, they wouldn't really get it to their lives, right? So then I changed. I checked how could I bring the type of houses we have here in Salvador that's very common. And of course, not only this, because they also need to know the other types, right? But my goal was to really bring something that was gonna be useful for them and close to their realities. So I changed a bit, and then I decided to change every class. The classes after that, they became very different. And once my students said after the class, teacher, whoa, it's so hard to think about it. We're talking about very deep topics. So she was like thinking so hard, and then she said, oh my god, seems like therapy. And I was like, oh my god, I didn't know exactly how to feel, but I thought, oh, I think that's it, I need to do it. We were coming, what I stayed with her, she stayed with me studying for almost a year and a half. And then next week she's traveling to Ireland. And the first whole year was only the old method, grammar, and blah blah blah. And then I was like, no, she doesn't need it. I need to talk. She needs to talk. She needs to talk about stuff that she will really use in her life. She will really use it to talk about going to restaurants, going out, watching movies, talking about herself, talking about her culture, because she will be with people from all of the world. So then I changed the classes, and then I decided to bring it to my basic classes as well, because and I made it to another group. Actually, they're two girls, and we started last year, and I changed it now. They're still in the basic, but then every class they are talking and they are improving so much. And I was thinking, oh my god, why I it took me so long to do it. And now, of course, because of you and every meeting we have, every video on Instagram you post, it has been changing my core as a teacher and English educator.
I love that. I'm in love with that. I love using real life stuff. And like, I would say that I'm even more inclined to just opening a link, like you said, opening a website and using what's there already, what's readily available, than like creating a slide about things, because it's just fucking there, right? Like, I love going on Zillow, which is like a real estate thing, like Quinto Andar, or like, where you find houses to rent, and going there and say, oh, pretend we're gonna, let's say you were gonna rent a house, what would we be looking for in a house? And then they would like talk about the put the criteria, we'd read the filters in the thing, and then it was like, okay, what do you think is a good thing here? And then they talk about the type of houses they want, and then we could ask them questions about like, where was the best house you ever lived in, or even go into using that there to be. Can you tell me what is in all of the homes of your house? Like, okay, let's start with your bedroom. There is como fala abajur, teacher? I would say left. There is so it's like making it real. Fuck yeah. Making it contextualized. Yes, girl, serve it. You're doing it. You're doing the most. Louisa, you had raised your hand. Is it still up or not? Like,
Yeah, I don't know how to use this,
okay.
but well, last last Friday I had like I teach the class. I don't teach English. I'm teaching like atualidades, and I was thinking about this because I like to plan my classes based on questions, and I conduct it by questions, and I like to I mean, it depends on how I keep going. Uh, I mean, the way I conduct the class depends on how they answer my questions, and I like to show students that they have abilities they don't realize yet. I mean, sometimes they what do you know? What do you study? And they're like, I don't know. I know nothing. And I like to show they have something. And when they realize they do, it's so great because they feel like yeah, I can help here. I know something. So I like to, and I like to bring theory to the reality too. I mean, I like to see, I like to teach, I teach a lot of things from vestibular, and sometimes it's difficult to come, to bring this to our reality, but there's always a way. I mean, uh, they have a life, and they live in the world, so we can bring it. And I don't know, I thought of this.
Absolutely. It's surreal to expect a person to put their life on hold for that 1 hour you're together. Like the person doesn't stop being a person magically, right? They got to continue being whoever they are. So I love that. You're doing the most again, right? Because it's about that contextualizing thing, making things real. And I love using vertical questioning. Like the person tells me something and then I ask them questions that are very prodding, that prod them into saying more. So using who, what, when, where, how, why to ask questions. And not just, did you like it? What did you think about X? How did you feel about Y? What if it had been different? And the person says, oh, I would love, blah, blah, blah. What does that look like? What would that look like? How would you feel if X, Y, Z happened? Like answering questions you don't necessarily need to know the answers to, but you're like a fucking journalist, right? It's journalist mode on, letting that person feel like the star of the show, and you're just asking them questions because they're so fucking fabulous and you want to know everything about their lives. Makes them feel special. Abner?
So I don't know how can I organize to start, but I have an issue with the beginners, like beginner students, because I feel like I needed to teach them like to the basic structures, for example, it's something that they need. And I like to start with this, but I in my classes I have the student as a focus. So I ask them questions, and depending of their questions, like Louisa said, I ask other things that are related. But in the class, in the conversation, uh, some things emerged, like some language issues that they may have emerged, and like I take notes, and then the class is like fulfilling my how can I say, my creation. So if I don't know what I'm going to plan in the first day with my student, because I need to listen to the student and to know the person, as a person. And I believe the person needs to know me as a teacher, like who am I, who I am actually. Um but I still struggle with the basic students. I don't know how to really conduct the conversation, because I feel like they stop a lot, and they feel like, oh, I can't really do it. And then I don't know. I don't know how to deal with that situation, but I tend to add some grammar or some things that I feel like during the conversation would be good for them to learn. And I already said that in the last time I participate here, that I use a lot of platform to organize things for my students. So it's not totally student led. It's like, okay, I'm listening you and I'm paying attention and I'm doing my coach job. It's not like a teacher. It's not even a teacher. It's like a coach, in a way that I see the students in the work, talking and reading text. I love to put in texts, because and relate those texts to the students' lives, because I feel like my class is always fresh because of it, because I know something about my students, and then I put in the text, and then um, I mold I how can I say that, I make the test, all the text words in the past, or the verb, the main verbs in the past, so they can slowly understand how used. how they can use with real examples. So it's not totally student led, but I I feel like more the students know English and more they are going to they are more they develop. How can I organize my words? But you guys understand me. I think you guys can feel me.
Absolutely, 100%. But you know what I'm thinking again, Abner? I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this again, but it sounds like a lot of fucking work to
But
write the
it's not.
text.
Yeah, I remember the last time I say thing, you say something like, "Oh, but you work on weekend." But I didn't say I don't work on Mondays, for example. So I have like 3 days, like Saturday, oh my God, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday free, more or less. Like, and then I attend my students in the other days. So it's not a lot of work in the end of the day because uh with the classes I know what I need to do, and it's now it's automatically, but maybe I do a lot and I'm just like used to do a lot and it's my normal now. Yeah, maybe we do have other strategies, but yeah.
But I absolutely get you, and I think that it's really cool that you are using the things that your students have told you to bring new things into them, into them. That sounded really strange, right? But you got it. Like, what I would say is when you're starting with a basic student, because all the ones I've met, geez, are crazy. What I would say with a basic student when you're starting off is that I would treat it as a person that I just met, a person that I just met, and I want to know things about them. I don't meet a person and then day one, I'm like, what are your hopes and dreams for the future? You know? Because that's such a big question to ask a person. I will ask them, where do they live? What sort of things do they like to do? What sort of music do they like? Or things that are simpler to process. And then eventually, as I get to know them through those answers to those questions, then I know where to go from there. So if they say, like, oh, I asked them if you could live when we're in the conditionals class, right? Which is about like the third, fourth class, maybe I would ask them questions with would, right? And if. So if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you like to live? Oh, I would like to live in Ireland. Oh, really? Is that a dream you have? Are you going to get organized for that? Oh, nice. So I know that maybe in the future, I could ask some questions about Ireland, could talk more about that. So yes, it's like fishing information in those conversations and using them in the future. And that is student led, right? The fact that it's about them. Student led doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that it does in bilingual schools. Because, for example, what is a student led project based learning situation in a bilingual school? We would take the kids to a park, for example, or we would take them to the playground and then they saw a bug. They were like, oh my God, miss, what is this bug? What is this? Is this or they saw a spider and there's like, oh, a spider is a really cool insect. And then maybe a kid is like, oh, spiders are not insects, my dad told me. And then there's that whole commotion in the middle of the kids. And then we're like, okay, people, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's understand what an insect is. Let's understand what an arachnid is. And then we start a whole fucking project about bugs. Then we learn a song about bugs. And then we learn, we make a bug bingo. And then we're working on numbers too. And then we do all sorts of things that involve bugs and are not necessarily just, like them watching videos. It's using their questions. We have a circle to talk about bugs and what questions do you have about bugs? What would you like to know? And then we go from there. We show them how to research. So that is student-led learning. It's absolutely like it comes from the student, from their curiosity, right? We're in a different environment where student-led means maybe more student-centered because it's about the student. Okay. It's all about the student, but maybe it necessarily doesn't come from the student because, as Abner said in the beginning, there's maybe not much to work with. So we need to know our students if we're going to really have student-centered learning. There's no way to have student-centered learning if we're just telling them things, right? So, and also, what I would say about the text is maybe the other thing that I would say about building a text for my student is that then they're not consuming an actual piece of content in that language that they could find anywhere else. So that maybe doesn't necessarily build a bilingual habit in them of consuming stuff in English, of going and opening some news and going on Instagram and seeing a post. So maybe instead of writing a text for them, I would show them an Instagram account of a writer that, has things that maybe would interest them, so that they create the habit, a bilingual habit of doing something that they could just open in on their phone and read anytime.
Yeah, and that's what I do with Trello, for example. It's a platform that I use. So I organize maybe some activities that they could do and that develop a bilingual, I don't know, bilingual interest on them. So I do that for them because I don't expect them to do that so naturally. So I'm give them species of, oh, this is something that you should do. Look up this site. It's Billboard has a lot of text, and actually you can play the transcription, like you can play the audio and listen to it. So I give it to them that possibility that they may not access, because I know Billboard does that, but they don't. So I give to them. Mm,
Makes sense, right? If it's working for you, like that's what it's all about, right? I'm all about like each teacher getting what's here and adapting it to their own practice, right? It's like I wouldn't personally do that because my thing is autonomy. And maybe when we come to the autonomy meeting, we'll be able to unpack that better. But I would say like these days, a teacher shared that they were using ChatGPT to see with their students like a study plan. If you ask ChatGPT, can you give me a study plan for 5 days? ChatGPT will do that. So I wouldn't do anything personally that ChatGPT could do for my student. That's kind of my policy. If my student could be doing this on their own, then I don't maybe see the thing in bringing it into class. Maybe I would provoke them to go there, provoke them to do that, ask them questions on how they could develop that, how they could find things. Because let's be honest, if they searched on Google 5 tools to learn English, they would find 5 fucking tools. They would probably, oh my God, my camera. They would probably come to Billboard in a certain way. They would probably come to, I don't know, the tools that we use with them that we suggest. Why do we have access to these tools? Why do we know about these tools? Because we're looking for it, because we're trying to find it, because we're interested in having bilingual habits. So if they don't do that for themselves, they're going to be coddled forever. But that is the autonomy meeting right there, right? So Fernanda. Hello? Is Fit there? She raised her hand, but I think she's not able to speak today, right? And my camera is still off. Fit, are you there? No? Okay.
I think she's chatting. Like
I've sent it
she
here in the chat. Okay, she's sending in the chat. Wait a minute. Let me open it here and read it. Ba, ba, ba. I've always felt like having deep conversations with people was the best way to really connect and create a safe, comfortable learning environment. But for some unknown reason, I suspect neoliberalism. But I don't know. I ended up thinking this was way too easy. Fuck yeah. And that I should do 1,000 different complex things during class. So I'd be mostrando serviço. And hearing you saying that this is the right path makes me hate capitalism even more, but also to trust more in my gut, kind of. Fuck yeah. We like deny our instincts 1,000 times a day. In my mentorships, I see a lot of teachers that they were teaching in very dynamic ways, very, very like instinctive ways, and then they ended up going towards a different boxed in direction because they thought, oh, this must not be enough. Once I actually got told off by the owner of this online school I used to work at last year because my classes were too personal, and that students were saying that in English class they were not actually learning English but doing therapy. Oh my God, if they're speaking English, how is it not learning English? And so my question really would be, how do you guys authorize yourselves to not feel like you should plan every second of the class and improvise like going with the flow? Well, I would say that that is a matter of experience, of consistently trusting your gut, going in that direction, seeing the results, collecting the empirical evidence, of what happens when you do that, and then using that in your favor and like strengthening yourself through that. I said today in my stories that improvisation demands a lot of mastery. You have to master the basics. You have to master things so that you can start to venture into creating something that's unique and that doesn't exist yet, or something that is truly yours, you know? So you gotta know your shit. That's the thing. You gotta do the research. You gotta know about bilingualism. You gotta understand student-led learning. You gotta scratch beyond the surface that I'm giving you guys here, because then you're gonna truly have the base to say, you know, the embasamento to say, no, fuck yeah, I'm doing the right thing because this, and that. You know, gotta feel comfortable in what you're doing, and the only way to do that is to find the justification of why you do what you do, because that's what happened to me. Like, I felt like a fraud, and then I started studying about it because I was like, fuck no, I'm not going to feel like a fraud. Why is what I'm doing feeling so good? Why is it working? Why are my students evolving? And still, this is not what the world is doing. Truth is, I think it's Anthony Warren that said that if you're doing what most people are doing, then you got to check yourself, because you're going in the wrong direction. Because the crowd is rarely going in the right direction, right? Rebecca?
Well, there is something that Abner brought up that it's also a issue for me, teaching beginner students using questions only. I'm saying this because last week I had this new student, and it was our second class. And she's a super nice girl. She's very kind. And I was asking questions, and I could see that she was frustrated with her English level. And I mean, I was asking basic questions. She had studied before at, you know, these traditional English schools that we know the name with 2 letters, 4 letters actually. Um, and she was super frustrated. And I could see this by the end of the class. And then in the next class, I decided to have a very honest conversation with her about how she feels. You know, what is the feeling about English, towards English? And she opened her heart and said, like, I feel really frustrated because I think I could speak better, I could speak more. And when you ask me questions, I want to answer you questions with a lot of vocabulary. I want to say everything that is in my mind, but I can't. And I see her point, I understand her. And this is my issue. Like, I don't want to see that my students are frustrated because they cannot answer my questions. But at the same time, I see the importance of asking questions, and I'd be like talking here, you know? So with intermediate advanced students, it works perfectly. It's amazing. I ask questions, they answer, we improve vocabulary, we connect. It's very good. It's the perfect scenario. And you gave me that, so thank you so much. Yes. But with my beginner students, I would say that this is my biggest struggle right now. I don't really know how to do it. And I felt so sad after that class. Now I'm okay because we had that conversation, and now I understand more and she understands as well. But I don't want to feel this again, you know? I don't know if I'm able to really deal with this or to control this feeling. I know I'm not, but I want to deal with this in a better way, you know?
Absolutely. And you're right to feel that way and to think, oh, I want to protect, I want to shield my student from those feelings. But in educational psychology, we talk about this a lot in like parenting. The biggest mistake parents make is to never letting their kids become frustrated, which doesn't mean to frustrate your child, but the world is frustrating. The world is frustrating. The thing that parents need to do is support children in that frustration and help them see things in a different angle, or just be there for them and embrace those feelings they have. So I would really bring that into our classes too, because it will be frustrating. Our students will be fucking, you know, like it's about a basic human need to feel understood. If you're talking to someone in their native language and they are like two people speaking in their native language together, right? The same language, sometimes we have some disconnection. Like when you're talking to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and then like you're saying things, but they're not fucking understanding what you mean to say. And then you're like, fuck, why don't you fucking understand me? You know? And you're like, oh, or you're like, oh my God, you'll never understand me. Oh my God, that is so normal because we feel like we need to be understood. And that is true. Like that's a need that we have. That's one of basic human needs. But and then I think of my son, like sometimes he comes to me and he's like, Mommy, and then I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. I don't understand what you're saying. And he's like, oh, and then I'm like, sorry again. I don't understand. I need words here. And then he's like, and then he just starts crying, and that's it. He's just gonna cry, and then I'm gonna like distract him, or tell him that, oh, are you feeling angry? Okay, come here. Do you want a movie? Whatever. So it's like, there's no way to prevent them from becoming frustrated, but we can support them and say, hey, I know you feel frustrated. That's a normal part of the process. Gotta get through it. The only way to get through it is for you to get your shit together and study, get your shit together and have contact with English, get your shit together and come to classes on time, because you're gonna feel frustrated. We just started this journey. It's so normal to feel frustrated in the beginning because we're not born knowing how to do everything. And that's normal because you can even say, like, it's a basic human thing to feel frustrated. But with time, if they persist, that's gonna get better, right? And then with questions and students that are beginners, we really got to keep it simple, feed them things through the chat, make sure they're understanding what we're saying and asking them things that are according to their level. Well, we can't not provoke them. We can't not have conversations with them just because they're gonna feel frustrated, because they really are. And that is not your fault that they're frustrated, but it is our responsibility to like be there for them and say, hey, welcome to the club. Share your experience about how you felt frustrated, maybe because I think like all of us have felt frustrated at some point when we're acquiring a language. I remember when I wanted to speak Portuguese and people were laughing at my face and like, what is wrong with this girl? And then I was just trying to speak, but and then here I am speaking. Imagine if Malcolm, my son, had given up on speaking like one of these days that I don't understand what he says. Can't happen. He's driven because that's what babies do. We're born natural learning machines, but then we're corrupted. So, it's rescuing that thing in our students of like, it's okay to not, it's okay not to be okay, to not be okay. It's okay to, feel how you feel, but let's keep on going. I'm here with you and showing that you're there. Does that make sense to you?
100%. And I'm very happy I had that conversation with her. So, yeah, yes.
Yes, the conversation was everything you could have done. It really is, because you can't work miracles. There's no way to speak English without having a conversation, right? And like eventually with practice, she'll get good at it unless she stops.
Yes. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, love. Julia?
So I was trying to remember why I raised the hand up, but now I got it. I was going to talk about the Stardust, this thing of trying to put some student-led class into Stardust. I don't remember. I'm not sure if it was Rebecca or somebody else, but somebody said something about having the personal art. That is exactly what I do. I don't ask that this is specifically, what is your personal art? But I try to understand, what is this person language? So how do you communicate? What do you do in your routine? Do you like watching movies? Do you like listening to music? I got really frustrated when I am trying to learn French, and I got really frustrated because I thought I could watch an episode of a sitcom in French, subtitle in English, and I was like, this doesn't work. I hated it from the beginning until minute 5 because I couldn't stand it. So I decided sitcoms, series, TV shows is a higher level than I am. So this is something that I'm still trying to figure out. Some things are not
ideal. Some things are not ideal for some levels. So you can I'm not okay today. Okay, so you can give little things that will fit people's routine, like maybe music would be something good for initiates, for starters. That's because I'm trying to learn French, and I'm doing okay with music. I'm not dying. I'm not wanting to kill nobody. Reading is also a good thing. Like some easy reading books, like child books, children's book, is something that's good. That's gonna make some changes, and always try to bring some stuff that are personal for them. Like I have some students that really like football, so sometimes when I trying to teach him something, he only will understand me if I give some analogy on football. I don't even remember what I have to tell him, but I was trying to teach him about, I don't know, present perfect, and I don't know how I fit it, but football positions, but I did it, and he learned the best way possible. So that's it. You have to connect them with their reality and our stuff that we're trying to tell him. Also, this is this, and you are here. This is still you, but we're just fitting other cultures. So some things are gonna be really alike with your culture, but some things are gonna be totally different. So that's basically the path that I'm trying to move.
Fuck yeah. That's what it's all about, really. In adapting things to students' reality, right? I think it's echoing. Your microphone is echoing a little bit. But wow, I even forgot what I was gonna say. Adapting things and blah 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 blah. Oh my god, I completely forgot. But anyways, I think that what you're doing is really awesome, and that's what you should do. Adapt things to their life, to their situation. Like the more we enter into the students' world, the better things get, you know? And oh, I remembered. You watched the thing in French, and then you noticed that that wasn't for you. And then what did you do? You reassessed. You reassessed and you asked yourself, what can I do that is not this? And then essentially, maybe our first instinct is to tell students what they should do if they get to that moment of frustration. But then, where's the metacognition in that? So you had that ability to assess this is too challenging for me, but that doesn't mean I'm giving up on French, right? It just means this is a challenge that's too big. So in that moment that a student maybe says, "Oh my God, I tried to watch something, it was horrible," then you could be the voice of your head voice, your metacognition voice, and be like, "Oh, was that a challenge that's too big for you? What do you think you could do that is easier? What do you think you could do that is simpler? Where do you think you could find language that's easier for you to understand?" Let them do the thinking. Let them do it because you did it. You thought it. You were like, this is too much for me. Let me go read a children's book or something. Because then maybe if I recommend a children's book to a guy that, let's say, he's a bachelor, he doesn't have kids, he doesn't care about kids, he cares about cryptocurrency. If I tell him to read a kid's book, he's going to say, fuck you. But if I go to my mom's group and then I say, y'all should start reading English with your kids, maybe. What do you think? What kind of books are you interested in? Or do you think you could read a book with your kid? Do you think that would be something they would be into? Or have you ever tried reading a kid's book? Let them answer it. Let them think about it. Let it sit with them. Because we don't have to do all the work. They could do the work because we're doing our work to learn our shit. Ain't nobody coddling us, right? So essentially, that's it. Centering things on the student because it can't be student led if we are giving them everything, right? That's the thing too. It can't be student centered if we are the center, if what comes from our head is the center of their experience. Student centered is about the student being at the center. That's ultimately it. So it's about everything that you're going to tell your student or you're going to ask your student is like, does this put my student in the center? Does this magnify their voice? Does this amplify their metacognition and their learning voice? Or does this just, put them in a passive position where they're going to listen to me? Because it's that diet versus health re-education thing again, right? So student-led learning is the bomb because it's really what makes classes personalized. right? And then I say that, and in the next meeting, I really want to do that planning lessons in under 20 minutes. I want to cover that with you guys because I think that's like the last step before we dive into autonomy. I really want to dive into autonomy, but I think that since we talked about student-led learning, now let's do something that can help us plan a class in in this style. Let's really learn how to make your own, because you have my spreadsheet with some classes that are in my style, but then how can you adapt this to your reality, to what you like to do, right? So we're going to cover that in the next class, and then from there we go to autonomy, and then we dive into other things, which is teaching the beginner students and teaching the intermediate and advanced. So there will be one meeting for each of those, okay? So if you have any questions, if questions come up during your practice, write that question down. Write down what you're feeling about things so that you can come to that meeting loaded, because it will be a Q&A situation, okay? Not any lectures, just you guys asking questions about teaching basic students and exchanging things, okay? So come with your burning questions, okay? Anyone else want to say anything? Louisa? No? Okay. You guys, thank you for your presence today. It has been magnific as always. You guys are the bomb. I'm very proud of you, of your persistence and being in this process of continuing, of being here every week. You are the bomb. So have a good one. Okay. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, Chris.
Bye
Bye.
bye, guys. Likewise. See ya.
See you.
Yeah.